Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Donald Grodoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast series, I delve into the hidden characteristics of OCD, anxiety, and anxiety disorders, the things that most people don't see, that are behind closed doors and shut within the mind about anxiety. My goal with these podcasts is to bring about awareness of obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Understand that I am not a doctor, therapist, or counselor, and the content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these podcasts are things that I have used, discovered, or have been recommended to me, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. The podcast you're about to hear was recorded and posted earlier in 2019 and is being posted now as part of the Best of 2019. So enjoy this podcast from the past as part of our Best of 2019. Thank you. This podcast was recorded March 22nd, 2019. This is podcast number 27, Coping with OCD in School. And this particular podcast has a focus towards teachers and parents in helping them to first understand and see the signs and the behaviors of OCD, and then things that they can do to help a child or a person cope through the class, through the day, dealing with OCD. You know, it's not really the job of a teacher to be a therapist, to try to solve or to cure them of their OCD. What I see their role really is about helping them to make it through the day without having as much flare-up of the OCD and coping with it. Parents, you do have a little bit more of a therapeutic job with your child in working with a therapist, particularly if you're doing the ERP therapy, which I have done. If you want to know more about ERP therapy, exposure response prevention therapy, there's another whole podcast. I think there's actually two of them in the archives about that you can look up and understand. But a parent will take a big role in that, in helping a child through that. So let's look at first some of the behaviors and signs to look for that can help you first understand if a child or a person is dealing with OCD. And the very first thing that a lot of times I look at is contamination. That's a big thing for OCD. Finding something is dirty, or finding something that is germ-filled and being worried about the germs, being anxious over the fact that things are dirty, play a big role, like I said. And so what you want to kind of look for in that is a child that gets very anxious and has a lot of anxiety, extreme anxiety, around somebody who has coughed or sneezed or shows some kind of signs of maybe having a little bit of a cold or sickness of some sort. They're going to avoid them. They're going to get anxious around them. They're probably going to clean themselves because of it. And these are things to look for. You can also look for somebody like that has dry hands. You know, when my daughter was so bad that her hands would crack and bleed because of the amount of washing she does, or did, I should say. And so you can look at that as one of the signs. Look at the fact that maybe they come in and clean off their desk. They might bring in some of the antibacterial wipes or cleaners or things like that and clean their desk off before they sit down. Be looking out for excessive cleaning in any way, that they take something, they have to clean it excessively. So it's going to extremes over um, the anxiety around somebody coughing or sneezing, the fact that they have to clean because of the contamination. Um, those are signs. Uh, there's a thing called magical thinking, and that's the idea of taking like a superstition and driving it to the extreme. Um, the saying like "step on a crack, break your mom's back" comes to mind, and what somebody like that who is dealing with OCD would do is you would find them nervously, like in the case of that particular statement, they would be looking at the pavement as they're walking along. They'd be looking at the floor as they're walking around. Um, they would take any superstition to the max as far as anxiety goes, extremeness of it, believing it to the fullest extent that whatever the superstition is, it's going to happen. And so you have to look for that nervous watching and thinking about this situation. Um, Catastrophizing, taking something that's happening in the world, some event that happened to them. Um, you know, Example might be if their parent is late picking them up, even if it's just by a couple minutes, they go into extreme panic and fear and worry, picturing all kinds of really bad things happening to that person who's late. Um, so pay attention to their body language. Are they watchful? Are they extreme in their anxiety? Are they nervous, sweating, maybe even uh, talking to themselves? Oh my God, they gotta. I bet you something's happened. I can't believe it. Oh, listening to what they might be whispering or saying under their breath could be important. Um, Scrupulosity. It's the idea that your thoughts or your actions offend God or in some way are blasphemous. And again, it's the same thing where, as in the catastrophizing, where you have to pay attention to what's going on for them, what their body language is saying, their extreme stressing uh, over and over and over about it. Um, that they may be praying a lot. They may be talking to God in some way. So you just have to be very watchful of what's going on. The what ifs, what if I harm someone? What if I hurt somebody? What if I stab somebody? Oh, I have this fork and I might stab somebody with it. I can't use a fork. Again, it's the same thing, being watchful for the extremes. Um, how they handle sharp things. You may see them eating with their fingers instead of using the forks that are sitting right there or that are available because they believe that they're going to harm somebody with those things. The feeling of just right. Something feels just right. They can't stop doing something until it feels right to stop. Um, some of that is the idea of um, being able to deal with how your clothes feel. You know, my own kids had a little bit of problems, not dramatic, but a little bit of problems with the tags in the back of the shirt would irritate them. You might notice somebody that has problems with the just right feel go through clothes, changing clothes often because it just didn't feel right. So you pay attention to that. Pay attention to how uh, you know they sense things. Again, it's a lot to do with body language and how intensely they pay attention to one thing, focus heavily on one thing, um, and make adjustments to it. All right, so let's talk about some steps that you can take in the classroom or in the school to be able to help that student cope. And, for teachers, these are steps you can take. For parents, it's things that you can address with the school to let them know some ways to help in the coping. Seating arrangements. You know, dealing with anxiety disorders, usually OCD tends to be a subset of another disorder like ADHD or even things like autism um, and so a lot of times they're dealing with other things. And a lot of times anybody that's dealing with anxiety gets distracted fairly easy, like an ADHD person possibly would. So you might want to keep them away from the door, away from a high trafficked pathway, even keeping them a little more distance from the window would be helpful. The other part of that is being able to give them space possibly in the back of the room where they sit at the back of a row or something like that, so that their little quirks of things they have to do because of OCD, the repetitive actions, the uh, bizarre actions sometimes, if they're sitting in the back, they would not be noticed as much if they have to do some of those triggers. And those things can be very embarrassing. And again, you want to pay attention to body language. You can tell when somebody is embarrassed, when they're blushing or when they're. So you want to keep an eye on that, but you also want them to be able to find a way to be able to do some of the behaviors um, that would look odd to somebody else. So giving them a place to do that, that leads right into giving them an escape route, so that maybe they're able to slip out the back door of the classroom, or find a little cubby space in the back where they wouldn't be seen, where they could do their you know so many thing tappings they have to do, or so many whatever they have to do. They could do it in privacy where nobody else sees them. And like I said, they get very embarrassed by what they're doing. I believe, in my mind, what I see and feel is that the mind of an OCD person has a tendency to know what they're doing and even think that it's not the wisest thing to do, or it's kind of stupid to do this. But the OCD part is so strong that it overrides that very easily. And so, yeah, they kind of know what they're doing, but they and that it's not right, or not, it's ridiculous. But the OCD is so overwhelming that they do it. Um, Giving them extended time to do tests or papers, or being able to do their test in a room on their own somewhere, or in a more private setting. Because what happens is they read over something, they read their answer, and they go, I don't know if that's right. They'll scratch it out and start over. And they may have to do this repetitively for a certain amount of time. And so it can take longer to complete test, or to complete a paper. You know, break the situation down into pieces better, so that they can tackle one piece at a time. So giving them some extended time to do that. Laptops for writing. You know, the problem with, what they go through in reading or writing is they don't know that they read it correctly, so they have to reread it over and over and over again. They write it, they go, oh, I don't know if this is written well. Let me rewrite it. And they're erasing and they're erasing and they're erasing. Versus doing it on a laptop, they at least have a much easier way to replace something without having to go through a lot of erasing. And it might speed up their process of dealing with it. Um, you want to skip them reading out loud, because again, they read. As they read, a lot of times they'll question one line and have to reread it. multiple times. And so you really want to be able to um, give them the opportunity to be able to read, but not have to read out loud, where if they have to repeat a sentence, they can do it. Otherwise, just raises their stress. Having books on tape that they can listen to might be another avenue. Um, and when you're doing papers or you're doing work, homework, whatever it is, have them break it down into pieces so that they can take one piece at a time. They don't get distracted, don't get thrown off, and it becomes an easier process for them. Now, this next one I think is a really big one, especially for the teachers, is to know which students have the OCD is a big part. So trying to become aware of who's dealing with it, and figuring out what the triggers are for that particular student, and what the different students, what their triggers are, so that if you have an event coming up or an activity coming up or an assignment coming up that has something involved in it that becomes a trigger for them, that you give them some advance notice of that situation so that they can possibly find ways to cope with that and not disrupt the class because of it. So being able to understand those triggers, don't cancel the event or the activity. That's feeding it. And like I said, you're not here to be a therapist, but you also want to not necessarily feed it. You don't want to cancel because that's unfair to the other students. And it really feeds into the OCD if you cancel or stop doing what you need to be doing. So, and some things, one other thing is, I believe, is an education. Educating your student population to what OCD is really about. And you may have the mom come in and do it, or the dad. Or if the student can do it themselves, that would be even better. If they can talk about what they're going through and put it in terms that the kids will understand, that would be great. But if not, having little breaks of talking about what anxiety is. So I believe that helps build more compassion for other students to understand what people are going through when they deal with OCD or disorder of any sort. Now, what can the other students do? Well, like I said, educating the students so that they can have a better way of handling the situation. They can be more understanding, more, trying to think of the good word for that, conscientious about it, so that you don't get bullying and teasing and things like that happen that can really mess a person up. And then possibility of finding kind of like a buddy system, like a friend in the class that will go through it with you, that will make the difference. So, and they have to be what I call a compassionate coach. So, and I go through, there's a podcast on compassionate coach, I believe, but it's one that's not a military drill sergeant. It gives them the sis boom ba, the let's go, you can do this kind of mode versus you just got to do this. Heck with it. Just go through it. Just do it. No, it's the you can do this. I really believe you can do this. I'm pushing for you. I'm hoping for you. All that kind of stuff. So that buddy, a friend, is the one that's the compassionate coach. So I hope this has helped you in some way, giving you ideas of things that can be done to help bring down the triggers and the activity of OCD. So thank you. Keep tapping and keep transforming your life. This concludes this podcast. We really would appreciate your comments. simply leave a comment at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. There, you're able to submit a comment that will help us determine future podcasts. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email Don at invisiblewheelchair.com. Remember, there is a corresponding tapping recording for each of the podcasts, with the exception of the interview podcast. You can find these tapping recordings and archive past podcasts at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Finally, there is relief for OCD, and we at FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com can help you find that relief. Again, you can contact us through those sites, FamilyOCD.com or FocusedHealthyFamily.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at InvisibleWheel1, that's the number 1, or at FamilyOCD. So thank you for listening. Keep tapping and transcending your life to new heights.